We are fortunate to have Margaret Francis for our March presentation speaking on Glo Hill. Margaret will cover her collecting of Glo Hill and some of the unique aspects of these items. Many of us are familiar with the chrome metal serving trays and the bakelite handled knives and fork sets, but there's much more. Glo Hill is part of Canadian history, and Margaret will introduce us to the company formed by the Globus brothers and Harry Hill in the 1940s. In the 1960s, the company's product line was over 600 items, including decorative metal trays, serving dishes, and stainless steel flatware. Certainly a broad expanse for the avid collector. Much Glo Hill is mid-century modern, and collectors describe some pieces as Art Deco looking, and other pieces of having an atomic age look. One collector wrote, "What sets Glo Hill apart from the others were their exquisite designs that can still be seen today." Margaret is the owner of Junk in the Trunk thrift store. Please welcome Margaret Francis.
Hello. How many of you here have owned Glo Hill or their parents owned Glo Hill? Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, my name's Margaret, and this is a talk on Glo Hill. So what is Glo Hill? Glo Hill was a line of serving dishes, barware, and cutlery that was very popular in the 50s and 60s. It has a mid-century modern or atomic age look to it. It's known for its distinctive polished chrome look and resin handle and knobs, and it's made in Canada. My interest in the subject is a relatively new one. I've been collecting and researching these items for only 6 years. Many of you know my father, Robert Francis, who was a longtime member of this club. He was a very avid collector. He loved many things and going to garage sales and any place he could find a bargain. I was busy with other endeavors when Dad was heavily into collecting, but I did collect many things on my own. It was when Dad and I started downsizing his massive amounts of items that I was formally introduced to the world of collecting, picking, and reselling of secondhand items. When I lost my full-time job at the same time, I decided that I was going to make a living out of this. One of the very first things I learned was that you had to find things that people wanted to buy. And people were into mid-century modern at the time, and it was a great appeal to buyers. So when I started scouring thrift stores and flea markets, that sort of thing, I was looking for things that had a mid-century look to them. One of the first things I noticed that there seemed to be a lot of these very shiny atomic age looking items. They fit in nicely with the mid-century theme, and so I started, well, I think I'll research these things. When I started into the research, that was my introduction to Glo Hill. Not only were they mid-century, but they were made in Canada. However, at first glance, there was not a lot of information on these items. And the little information I found seemed to have a lot of contradiction about what it was, who invented it, and what pieces were available. I also found that though people were selling pieces on eBay, there was actually no reference for what had been made, what the functions were, and what pieces came with what sets. I did stumble across the email address of one of the daughters of one of the founders, and she and I corresponded back and forth. She did give me a brief history of what was correct about the company itself, but did not have any information for reference material. At this point, I thought, well, here's a project for me. I'm going to collect Glo Hill, and I wanted to write an actual website that would have reference to Glo Hill for other collectors. I was very fond of a site called Pyrex Love. I don't know if anyone's been on that, but for Pyrex collectors, you could go on the site and you could find any information you wanted on different designs or what was bought. So I wanted something similar. What I didn't know at the time was that Glo Hill had produced over 600 items. And they also not only produced 600 items in their store inventory, they also did unique custom pieces. I also found out that life happens, and I had little free time to start the online site, so that's a task still in progress. However, the collecting side of things is progressing quite nicely. And I have buckets of Glo Hill waiting to be identified. And so much for my personal downsizing goals. Why was Glo Hill so successful? Basically, it was timing and marketing. After World War II was over, men were returning from the war and times were much more relaxed and hopeful. Entertaining became a favorite pastime. Cocktail parties, bridge parties, and home entertaining in general were major social events. Everybody hosted parties. Homemakers also took great pride in their home and went to great lengths to put on perfect events. A typical homemaker had many items that were specifically for home entertaining and were not used for anything else. Glo Hill came onto the scene at the right time. Glo Hill made a wide variety of most of these items, and with their modern look and affordable prices were desired by homemakers. Glo Hill sold its items in many locations such as catalogs, variety stores, supermarkets, and even the higher-end items were sold at Burke's. Any baby boomer would probably recognize a piece that their mother or grandmother had in their collection as being Glo Hill. The other aspect to its success was it was the first household items to be put into fancy gift boxes and sold as a gift item in gift stores and other places. At that time, most things like forks and knives were sold in hardware stores. So put it in a pretty box, advertise it as a gift item, and suddenly you have a success. So let's go on to the history. I did get some history from the sons and daughters of all the original founders of Glo Hill. And after much collaboration to ensure that everyone was satisfied with the printed history, this is the approved version of the Glo Hill history. There actually was 4 founders of Glo Hill, and I was dealing with 4 sets of sons and daughters. And everyone thought that their dad had done something more unique than the others, so it was 2 months of collaboration back and forth to get the approved history. The history of Glo Hill starts back in the 1940s. In 1941, Leo Globus was in the Royal Canadian Air Force when he was in a bad car crash. With the money he received from the settlement from the crash, he decided to start up a business with his brother, Jack Globus. Both had metalworking experience and worked in the picture frame industry, and they decided to start up a metal picture frame business. They rented out a warehouse in Montreal and decided to call the business Photo Frame and Utilities. After a few years producing picture frames, they decided to take their metalworking experience in a new direction. It was decided that they would try to develop cutlery, and their first success was a paring knife that they sold to International Harvester in Vancouver. At this point, they invited their other brother, Saul Globus, and their brother-in-law, Harry Hill, to join the company and moved to a larger facility in Montreal. They renamed the new company the Glo Hill Cutlery Company. Jack was a natural businessman, and he and Saul were very creative in designing and styling the products. They often styled a lot of unique items, like you'll see the stoplight jigger. It's on the second table there. It's one of their inventions, and you also see, I've noticed some unusual cutlery I've never seen before tonight too, so I think they were always trying new and different things. Saul was also the first person in Canada to hit on the idea of putting the cutlery in fancy gift boxes. Leo put his engineering and mechanical aptitude to use in building and maintaining the factory and production process. It's another thing they were known for. They did most of their production in-house. And Harry Hill concentrated on the day-to-day administration. The company grew from producing cutlery to now producing over 600 items ranging from barware, serving trays, steak knives, and other household items. In the 1960s, they changed their name to the Glo Hill Corporation. At the height of their business, they had over 160 employees working for them, and Glo Hill was not only the first to sell household items as giftware, it was also unique. It fabricated most of its stuff in-house. Many of the production processes, such as the mirror finishing, were proprietary to Glo Hill at that time. Now, some of the components, such as the glass inserts, were purchased from well-known companies such as McKee, Jeanette, and Glassbake. And Barbaro Craft of Montreal created the wood inserts in the meat trays. And quite often when you're collecting this stuff, you will not find it with the trays intact. In 1969, Jack Globus left the company to pursue other endeavors. Harry Hill followed in 1970. The remaining brothers continued running the company until 1978, when it closed its doors, thus ending one of Canada's most prolific specialty giftware companies. Its legacy lives on as collectors rediscover these beautiful and functional pieces of Canadian history. Now, there's a little bit of debate why they closed, but the general consensus is that number one is the party aspect was sort of over by the 70s. People weren't doing as much home entertaining, and there was a lot of other competition too from other places. Identification and types of Glo Hill. It can be categorized into 3 different components. It has a very shiny chrome-like or gold finish to it. It has resin handles and accents. The plastic used is not Bakelite. Bakelite is a registered trademark of a different company and has a slightly different chemical composition than the phenolitic resin that Glo Hill used. Instead of describing a piece having Bakelite, the term resin should be used. And the sons and daughters were very emphatic with me about that. They don't want lawsuits. Okay, the finish can actually come in silver or gold. Most of the time you'll see it in this high mirror-like finish to it, but I do have a couple pieces that have a gold finish to it. And as I said before, there's over 600 items made. Now, there was 3 different components to Glo Hill. The first component was they branded gourmets. They were like bread trays, platters, coffee sets, and other serving items. Their second component was called barmates. They were like barware, ice buckets, jiggers, bar sets, bar utensils. And steak mates. They were knife carving sets and steak knives. And here's an example of some of the logos you may see, and actually I just saw a couple of new logos tonight. Most of the time the gourmets line just had a little sticker on the bottom, or they would have it in their gift sets too. It would be on the logo would be on the back of the gift set. This is unfortunate because if you wash Glo Hill, your sticker's going to disappear, or some people just peel the stickers off. So sometimes I've been showing pieces and I cannot 100% sure say it's a piece of Glo Hill because they didn't engrave it on it. Whereas the barmates and the steak mates, they have actual engravings in different forms on it. Sometimes it's just straight printing saying Glo Hill Corporation or Glo Hill Company made in Canada. Other times they have, especially on the steak knives, Marvo Live Edge, which I guess was their branded super sharp edge brand. And there were different sort of versions of the logo, usually a stylized G or an H. Now the colors of the resin. One thing you're going to notice, it came in many different colors. One of the sons of Glo Hill was trying to tell me the exact company name for them because they aren't used very much nowadays. But we came across about 4 or 5 actual colors, and then there were some variations of others. So you're going to see it in a deep red or a cherry. Burgundy Briar was the actual name, which was a combination of cherry and deep red and ebony. Then you had butterscotch, gold and ebony, fantastique, which is teak and butterscotch, and then there's a whole plethora of faux antler, bone, or wood too. So they tried to sculpt some of the handles to look like it came from a deer or piece of wood. Now, one of the most difficult aspects of collecting Glo Hill and identifying it is finding out exactly what some of the more complex items were and what different pieces came with each one. For example, the 2 top slides I have here are cream and sugar sets. Now, the cream and sugar set on the left there actually is missing its top. I actually have that set down on the end there. The bottom 2 are an example of a serving dish with the glass insert, and on the right is the Barbaro Craft wood insert on a meat tray. I do have a meat tray, it's in the middle on the end of this table, but it never came with the wood. Here's another example of some of the pieces that came with it. Now I am looking for some of these pieces, the glass inserts. This is an example of some of the condiment stands. The orange glassware was called Aztec, and the black and silver was called Art Deco. And the one in the middle, actually, I just found the other day, is it had these little flower-shaped glass inserts too, which I'd never seen before. Now these are examples of sets that were on eBay that they're advertising as complete sets. As you can see, that they're not complete sets. Now some of the components of sets are often mistaken for other items and not sold with the sets. This happens a lot in estate sales, thrift stores, and garage sales, especially since the item may not be in an original box. Here's an example of a foray into a big box thrift store here in town. On the left is a set of 4 glass, what they were trying to advertise as like little tidbit trays. I went walking down the aisle and down another aisle, and on the right is a Glo Hill thing they were trying to sell as a candy tray. And if you notice that actually 3 of the inserts actually are supposed to go in, so the bottom is a complete set. And this is another example of little bits and pieces that people are trying to sell. They don't know what it is, so they just sell it. Sometimes you get them in bag lots. Now one of the things with Glo Hill too is it was sold in jewelry stores, and people often had them engraved for presentations. Sometimes they made them into trophies. I did see one where they had drilled a hole in the center, put a little stand, and put a bowling trophy on top. So sometimes you'll come across them as being engraved and presentation items. Collecting Glo Hill. Once you've identified a few items, you can probably spot a piece of Glo Hill a mile away. A lot of the surviving Glo Hill is still in nice condition, mainly due to it being an entertaining item and only brought out for special occasions and not put in the dishwasher or abused every day. It's also fairly affordable. Prices can range from $1 up to $200, and actually I'm going to raise that to $300 now because I just saw on eBay something just sold for $300. I have noticed in the last few years as Glo Hill gets more known, the prices are starting to creep upwards, especially with the more desirable items. And what are the desirable items? Mostly the barware. Especially the ice buckets and bar sets, the carousel bar sets. That's the set that sold for $300. But any presentation sets and the more complex sets that all have all the pieces, and also specialty made items. Some of the more useful items, such as the double or triple tiered serving trays. I've got a couple of double tiered trays down at the end there. I've seen them as big as 5 tiers deep. I find that a lot of young people are buying these nowadays because they think they're cool looking and they're also very functional. Price ranges. Desirable items you can always find on eBay or Etsy. Just make sure that your sets are complete. More common or useful items can still be found at garage sales, estate sales, thrift stores, and flea markets. You will have to look for condition issues, especially when considering purchasing a higher priced Glo Hill item. Scratches on the shiny surface are common. Breaks in the resin, it's actually more fragile than it looks, especially over age. You drop it, the resin can shatter. Sometimes there's missing feet, and sometimes there's real wobbly construction. Items that are engraved are also less desirable unless they are a special order item such as a trophy. Now you're looking at the lower end, $1 to $10, which is your bread trays, tidbit trays, and single items. $10 to $40 are like the multi-level hors d'oeuvre trays. Things like that, maybe a more fancy tray with a couple of tiers on it. $20 to $100 single item barware, stoplight jiggers, and bar sets. And $100 and up are the ice buckets, coffee urns, bar carousels, and custom made pieces. So I'm still hoping to publish something online and have a resource for Glo Hill. And I'm still looking for unique pieces to photograph to add to the collection. One of the things I'm personally looking for is any advertising, whether it be catalogs, posters, pamphlets that show the Glo Hill as it was sold. Fortunately, I forgot to bring it tonight. I did have a 1966 Consumers Disturbing catalog, which had 5 pages of Glo Hill in its original form. I would love to get some pictures of these items to help with the research. In conclusion, I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and have learned a little bit about this unique piece of Canadian history. There is some items that people have brought over there. If they want me to answer any questions about it, I'd be happy to do that, or if people have questions, I can answer them now. Thank you. About this. He did want to stress that the formula that they used is slightly different. It's a similar chemical compound, but it's slightly different. They call it the phenolic resin, I think is what he kept calling it. Bakelite is actually a trademarked product, and I'm not sure who came out first, whether their product came out first or Bakelite came out first. I think it was Bakelite. But they did not want to have any lawsuits with Bakelite on it. Now that the company's out of business, I don't think people really care. But it's something that he pounded into me when I was getting the research done, is that when I did my talks, to make sure I pointed out to everybody this is not Bakelite.
Yeah, just say the Bakelite.
Just when you think you've got a handle on what the sets were all about, they were very innovative, and they would take a piece off one set, drill a hole in something, put a piece from another set and call it something new. And they're different batches of the resin that they use too. They would do production runs, so you won't find some of the more intricate ones that are different colors. You may not find ones that match your set exactly. Basically, the 4 errors that I put up on there, I didn't bring it with me, but in one of the slides, one of the satiny embossed backgrounds said Glo Hill Cutlery Corporation. So that would date it sometime probably between about 1946 to about 1960. Whereas in the 60s is where they changed the name to the Glo Hill Corporation. So sometimes on the cutlery you can see it says Glo Hill Cutlery Company. I could not find any examples from their photo frame days. Nobody seems to have any information on that.
I see a lot of this kind of thing, but it's not Glo Hill, so...
It did go into the States a little bit too, wherever they could sell it, like in gift stores. Yes, there is pieces out there too, like people bring me pieces, and it does look like Glo Hill with the very, very shiny mirror-like finish. I think people ripped off that production from them, but they were one of the first to do that. But you can usually just tell from the looks of them. Actually, I'm not sure who it was that was talking to me about the picture that was in the newsletter that showed the filigree. The Glo Hill. I'd have to have a good look at that one because I've never seen anything with filigree on it before. But the handles look about right, but people did kind of rip off some of the stuff.
There was no.
Well, they got the glassware from Jeanette McKee and Glassbake, so I'm sure that they were using, those pieces are actually part of maybe Glassbake sets or Jeanette glass sets. The only way that you would know is by having a complete piece of Glo Hill and knowing what it looks like and then seeing that piece someplace else. I mean, it's never stamped with Glo Hill, it'll say made in USA or McKee or Jeanette on it too. But I'm sure that they mass produce, let's say, the little glass inserts for their hors d'oeuvre trays and that sort of thing.